There is one thing I have never said out loud to anyone. Not to my brother, not to my doctor, not even to the priest I used to see on Sunday mornings. And I am 83 years old now, so if I don't say it today, I probably never will. My name is Harold. I am 83 years old. And I spent the whole of my 50s without ever once having a girlfriend. Not a date that led anywhere. Not a relationship that lasted longer than a few awkward evenings. Just me, alone, in a house that was always slightly too quiet. I want to tell you why. Because I only truly understood it about 4 years ago. And understanding it, even that late, even at 79, changed something in me that I didn't know was still capable of changing. Let me take you back to the year I turned 50. I remember standing in my kitchen on my birthday morning. There was no one to call, no one who would notice whether I made breakfast or didn't. I made coffee, I stood at the window, and I watched the neighbors across the street. A young couple, maybe 30, maybe a little older. And they were laughing about something on their porch. Just laughing, nothing special. But I stood there watching them for longer than I should have, and when I finally turned away, I told myself what I always told myself back then. I said, "Harold, you are fine. You have your work. You have your routines. You are fine." I said that to myself so many times over those 10 years that I stopped hearing the word fine and just heard silence. I worked in civil engineering for most of my life. I was good at it, the kind of man who showed up early and stayed late and was trusted with complicated things. My colleagues respected me. My bosses relied on me. When I walked into a room at work, I knew who I was. I had language for myself there. I had a shape that other people could see and recognize and value. But when I walked into any other kind of room, a dinner party, a neighbor's backyard, a church social, I became someone I didn't quite recognize. Stiff, careful, listening more than I spoke. And when a woman showed interest, when someone leaned toward me at a table or laughed a little longer at something I said, I would feel this warmth rise up in me, just briefly. And then almost immediately I would find a reason to cool it back down. I wouldn't do anything dramatic. I wouldn't be rude. I would just go quiet. I would change the subject. I would mention work or leave early or somehow find a way to let the moment pass. And the moment would always pass. And I would drive home and I would sit in my car in the driveway for a little while before going inside. There was a woman named Patricia. I met her when I was 54. She worked in the planning department of the city office, and we ended up on the same project committee for about 6 months. She was warm, straightforward. The kind of person who said what she meant without making a performance of it. She had been widowed a few years before, I knew that. She had 2 grown children. She wore her hair short, and she always seemed like she was paying attention to you, really paying attention, in a way that not many people do. We had lunch together 4 or 5 times over those months, just the 2 of us, at a small place near the office. And I genuinely knew that she was open to something more than lunch. It wasn't anything she said directly. It was quieter than that. The way she would ask about my weekend and actually wait for the answer. The way she mentioned once, almost offhandedly, that she hadn't been to the botanical gardens in years and had always meant to go back. I heard that. I understood exactly what that was. And I said something like, "Yes, I've heard it's very nice this time of year." The project ended. We said we'd stay in touch. We didn't. And I thought about Patricia for a long time afterward. Not with regret exactly, or not only regret, more like with a kind of bewilderment. I would ask myself, Harold, what were you afraid of? And I would not have an answer. I just knew that something in me had closed the door, quietly, without my permission. And I hadn't been fast enough or honest enough to stop it. That happened more than once in my 50s. Different women, different circumstances, but the same door closing at the same moment. I turned 60 and the decade was just gone. And I carried it with me, not loudly, not in a way that anyone around me would have noticed, but I carried it. The way you carry something you're slightly ashamed of without knowing exactly what the shame is for. My brother Raymond used to ask me gently over the years whether I was seeing anyone, and I would say no, and he would nod, and neither of us would say anything more. Raymond was married for 40 years. He passed about 6 years ago. I miss him in a way that I still can't fully account for. He was the only person in my life who ever asked, and I never once gave him a real answer. I retired at 67, and in retirement I had more time than I had ever had before, and I did not know what to do with it. I read, I gardened. I took a woodworking class at the community center, which I actually enjoyed far more than I expected. And I had more time to sit with myself than I'd had in 40 years of working, and slowly, in that quiet, things started to become visible that hadn't been visible before. I started thinking about my father. My father was a good man in most of the ways that counted. He worked hard. He was honest. He never raised a hand to any of us, but he was what you might call sealed. He did not discuss feelings. He did not ask how you were in a way that invited a real answer. When my mother cried, and she did cry occasionally, she was a tender woman, my father would leave the room. Not out of cruelty. I don't think it was cruelty. I think he simply had no idea what to do with emotion that was openly expressed, so he removed himself from it. And I grew up watching that. I grew up understanding, without anyone ever saying it plainly, that feelings were something you managed privately, that need was something close to weakness, that to want someone, to openly want their company and their closeness, was to expose something in yourself that was better kept covered. Nobody told me that in words. I want to be clear about that. My father never sat me down and delivered that as a lesson, but children are always learning, even when no one is teaching. And what I learned very early was how to be self-contained, how to be fine, how to need nothing that I couldn't provide for myself. And for a long time that looked like strength. It felt like strength. I was reliable. I was stable. I did not burden people. I did not ask for things I wasn't sure I deserved. I managed. What I didn't understand until much later was that I had never actually learned how to let anyone in. Not really. I had learned how to be pleasant company. I had learned how to be useful, how to be present in a practical sense. But that deeper thing, that willingness to be seen in your uncertainty, in your wanting, in your ordinariness, that had never developed in me the way it should have. So when a woman like Patricia leaned in, when the warmth of real human closeness came near enough to touch, some part of me that was formed a very long time ago would calculate the risk and quietly close the distance. I understood this at 79. I was sitting in the garden late afternoon and I was thinking about nothing in particular, and it just came to me, not dramatically, more like something settling. I thought, Harold, you were not unlucky in love. You were frightened of it, and the frightened part was built so long ago that by the time you were 50, it had been running the operation for decades without you ever once auditing the books. I sat with that for a long time. I didn't feel sorry for myself exactly. I felt something more complicated than that. Something like grief, but also something like relief. Because to finally understand a thing, even a painful thing, even 40 years too late, is still better than never understanding it at all. I am 83 now. I am not telling you this story because I resolved it neatly. I didn't. I live alone. I have a good life, quieter than some, and I have made a kind of peace with its shape. But I am telling you this because I spent 50 years calling a locked door a choice. And it wasn't a choice. It was a habit so old I'd mistaken it for my personality. If you are younger than me and you find yourself always finding a reason to let the moment pass, I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's not what this is. But I will tell you that the reason you keep giving yourself is probably not the real reason. And the real reason is probably older than you think and smaller than you fear, and a great deal more worth looking at than you have allowed yourself to believe. I'm Harold. I'm 83. And it only took me most of a lifetime to understand that being self-contained is not the same thing as being whole.